Mm, Good evening. Ah, beautiful to be here with you. And get to keep reading this amazing book. Today has been a day in just amazement over the small things of this world and the deep gratitude of everything. Uh, I'm still in Stockholm and have had a day of rest and a day of company with some of my closest, and just so much love. So I will dive right into uh, the book together with you. And you're so welcome to take your place in this circle and let me know who's here. Hmm. Element air, Onya. Air is the breath of life. It is the second medicine, the second gift from the Creator. We receive this gift, our first blessing from the world, the moment after we're born. When we inhale our first breath, the first prayer we send out into the world is our first exhale. From that day forward, every day of our life, whether we're awake or asleep, every breath we take is a blessing, and every breath we release is a prayer. Each breath of life is an opportunity to reconcile and reconnect with our spiritual journey. The gift of air should never be taken for granted. Unlike fire, air cannot be controlled, captured, or contained. Without air, we cannot make fire. Without wind, the water in the oceans cannot transmute into the rains to water the earth. We can live without many things that sustain life for days or even weeks, but we cannot live without air for even a couple of minutes. Wind is air in motion. It can come in many forms, from a whisper to a mild breeze to a howling hurricane force gale. Wind is the powerful, unseen force that animates the world around us, teaching us lessons in gentleness, strength, awareness, and perseverance. Sending our breath on the wind through a flute creates a melody that can make us cry or make us dance. A gentle breeze rocking a new sapling tree back and forth, ever so slightly and consistently, strengthens the root system so that it's able to withstand the storms that it will face throughout its life. Later in life, the wind will take the leaves off that tree as fall turns into winter. The wind will bring the rains as spring turns into summer. Wind is the unseen hand of constant change, sent to us from the spirit realm. Both the wind and the south represent the invisible forces of our heart, mind, and spirit. Indigenous elders say that wind can signify that a change is coming. A big wind can be a sign of a big change. But we can affect this change ourselves by turning air into wind, wind into breath, breath into words, and using those words to speak our desires into reality. All too often, we forget that the element of air and the power of the wind have valuable lessons and wisdom to offer us. and all it takes is simply to sit still and follow our breath or listen to what the wind has to tell us. The story of the fur trapper. 500 years ago was a time of great change for the indigenous people of Turtle Island. The Eastern Territories had been invaded by foreign European hostiles, and the Europeans were sweeping west, claiming and colonizing anything and everything their eyes fell upon. The indigenous people of the lands to the far north had very little interaction with the colonizers at this point, and so they didn't yet realize the destruction that these strange new people from across the great waters were capable of. One day, a pale foreigner, dressed head to toe in animal pelts, entered the indigenous people's camp with a translator from one of the southern nations. The translator arranged an audience with the council of elders, and the foreigner explained that he was a world-renowned fur trapper and had traveled several moons to meet these elders. He had heard the tales and legends of the great bounty of resources of their land and wanted to establish a trade route to extract the resources of the land and take them to the market in the east. The trapper told the elders that he would make each of them very rich. The elders did not understand the desire for a human to sell the blessings and beings of Mother Earth to make a few people rich. The council tried to teach the fur trapper that the land and the animal relatives of the land belonged not to no human. They explained that their council acted as the guardians of the land and, as such, they denied his request and asked him to leave. The trapper had already considered the elders could deny his request, but he also knew that he could count on their well-known generosity and hospitality, characteristics the colonizers exploited of them. The elders granted his request to trap some beaver so he could have pelts to trade for food and supplies on his journey back home. The fur trapper was led to a valley deep in the mountains with 3 very specific instructions. Trap in this valley and nowhere else. Only take what you need for your journey and nothing more, and leave by the next full moon. The trapper agreed and gave his word. The fur trapper quickly learned that the legends and tales did not even come close to the treasure trove of animals available for the taking. Not only was there every highly desired fur pelt imaginable in the valley, but the beavers alone numbered in the hundreds. He began trapping immediately and trapped from early in the morning until late at night. He couldn't empty his traps fast enough before they were full again. The trapper couldn't even sleep at night because the beavers slapping the water with their tails never stopped. But he would find sleep every once in a while with a big smile on his face, knowing the riches that were piling up due to all the fur pelts. The trapper swept through the valley with his iron traps as the time he was told to leave drew near. A few days before the upcoming full moon, the council of elders asked about the pale-skinned man they had left in the valley. The scouts reported that the trapper had not yet left the valley, nor was he anywhere close to the only practical entry and exit point. The elders sent a band of warriors to track down the fur trapper and escort him out of their homeland. The first thing the warriors discovered was that the trapper had killed nearly every single beaver in their sacred valley. He had bundled up their pelts and hidden them in the caves that were scattered throughout the valley, because there were simply too many to haul out in one trip. The warriors quickly found the trapper's trail and picked up speed, knowing the fur trapper was a few days' ride ahead of them, and they needed to close this distance fast. At this time, the trapper was becoming anxious, knowing the elders would send warriors to find him soon, but his guarantee of being powerful and wealthy beyond measure was only a couple of hundred more beaver pelts away. How could he stop when he was so close to such a huge fortune? As he lay awake in bed, listening to the slapping of the beaver tails on the water and calculating how many more beaver pelts, would be required to achieve his fortune, a single howl pierced the night. The hair on the back of his neck stood straight, and he scrambled out of his tent. It was a wolf relative, and the howl was so long that it seemed impossible that this was a single animal. Then another howl and another howl joined in from various parts of the valley. He realized that he was surrounded by wolves. He broke camp and left immediately. The trapper would travel from a time, and then he would see a couple of members of the wolf pack, which would force him in another direction. A bit later, he would see another few members of the pack off in the distance, and that would force him in yet another direction. This went on throughout the day and night and drove him to exhaustion. At twilight, on his last day, all sounds in the forest went silent. The fur trapper heard a faint rustling all around him, and glowing eyes appeared. There was no time to run. He jumped off his horse and scrambled to the top of a cottonwood tree. The trapper made it to safety, but the faithful horse under his care did not, and the wolves took up position all around the cotton tree. The trapper had faced off against many different predators before, and he was resolved that these wolves would not be having him for a meal any time soon. He reassured himself that he was a famous trapper known for taming the wild and savage lands uh, of this new frontier, and reminded himself that women idolized him, children called him a hero, and lesser men wished they were like him. The wolves would make runs at the tree and attempt to claw their way up, but they were simply not built to do this. The trapper began taunting the wolves that they were no match for his greatness and should just give up and go away. And after a couple of days, some of them did. The remaining wolves stayed and stalked the tree, never allowing the trapper to come down or run away. On the fourth day, the warriors had caught up and positioned themselves on a ridge line a short distance from the wolf pack and fur trapper, just watching. It was the night of the full moon, and it was so bright it looked like silvery daylight shining on the forest. All of a sudden the wolves began to howl, and as each wolf joined, their crescendo grew, and fear turned the fur trapper's blood um, into icy river water. The circle of howling wolves parted as the alpha returned with their relatives, the beaver. They made their way to the cottonwood tree, where the beaver slowly ambled to the base of the tree that held the fur trapper. The wolves circled the tree as the beaver got to work. Just before the tree started to fall, the trapper gave up hope and began crying. The warriors came and chased off the wolf pack and returned the trapper to the camp and took all his fur pelts. They gave him food and allowed him to rest. The council then met with him, telling him of his wrongdoings, and banished him from their lands. He returned home with a lesson and his life. Indigenous virtues, honesty and integrity. Honesty and integrity may seem like terms that are interchangeable, but they're really quite different. Honesty is an internal moral value, while integrity represents the actions we do in our everyday lives. The Lakota associate honesty and integrity with the South because the spirit realm has the highest level of interaction in our life when we're most free in self delusion and self righteousness. This clarity comes from our self work of clearing the obstacles that obscure our sense of honesty and integrity. This work entails seeing and celebrating life and understanding who we are meant to be. It means working with the lessons of the second medicine, and it takes getting our mindset positioned in a good way. Observing our intentions from a place of honesty and acting with integrity in our day-to-day life are the lessons the South offers to teach us. Let's look further into each of these values. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do tomorrow, to dive into honesty and integrity as virtues. Thank you so much for tonight. Such a blessing to share these evenings with you. And I hope that the sleep and the evening will give you everything that you need. And I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.